Welcome back, everybody. Now we will start with our third and final panel of the day. So please give a warm welcome to our panelist and chair, Josephine Chiname.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and happy International Women's Day. This panel will look into what are some of the actions and solutions that we can implement to deal with the challenges that we have been discussing the whole day. So my name is Josephine Chiname, as Sophia said, and I'm an Atlantic Fellow with the International Inequalities Institute here at LSE. So with the panelists, I have here Dan Collison. Dan, who is the CEO of Farm Africa. Prior to Farm Africa, he led the international programs for War Child, working on children's rights in conflict-affected countries, such as Afghanistan and Yemen. He worked for several years for the Save the Children, including in Myanmar and Southeast Asia, as well as in Southern Africa and Angola. He lived and worked in Kenya, South Sudan, and for a number of years with Christian Aid. Dan has led development of Farm Africa's new 5-year strategy, building on the organization's strength in agriculture, market engagement, and natural resource management, and increasing the focus on food systems and climate action. Next to Dan, we have Funke Michaels, who is a fellow of the Policy Academy at Newcastle University. Nigerian, Kenyan, citizen of the world is how Funke Michaels describes her mixed cultural heritage. She was raised in an ancient tradition of Yoruba griots, and beginning as a child broadcaster at the age of 3, has addressed remarkable audiences over decades of public speaking. She was featured variously on Nigerian national television as a child analyst, a debater, speaking mainly on education and the girl child. She has held several high-profile brand management roles before transitioning fully into academia. Next to Funke, we have Mikael Kubimana.
Well done.
Yeah, practiced well. Who is a passionate entrepreneur dedicated to community development and sustainable business. As a founder and CEO of Kawa Coffee, she empowers Rwandan farmers, especially women, by adding value at the source and ensuring fair compensation through a direct trade model. She also leads Rwanda Business UK, fostering economic ties between Rwandan and UK entrepreneurs through trade, investment, and collaboration. Committed to sustainability and empowerment, she envisions a world where business drives lasting positive change. And lastly, but not the least, we have Oluchukwu Okonkwo, who is a researcher and PhD student who has been a key collaborator of the Sugar Creek project since its creation in 2021. She holds both a bachelor's and a master's degree in architecture and incorporated Sugar Creek into a final thesis, which secured her nominations for the Riba Skin Thinking Award. Sugarcrete is a revolutionary biomaterial made from sugarcane waste. This award-winning project has quickly gained the attention of leading sugarcane plantation companies who wish to convert this waste into sustainable construction blocks. In September last year, the Sugarcrete team completed their first proof of concept building, a school extension in India, constructed entirely with Sugarcrete bricks. So this panel is going to help us in moving forward. We have been hearing quite a lot about the challenges, the barriers that women along the various agriculture supply chain are facing. So I will start with you, Dan. Based on Farm Africa's experience, how do the challenges that were discussed here around conflict, climate, access to markets, among other things, play out on the ground, and how do women farmers themselves describe and navigate these barriers that we have been discussing here.
Thank you, Josephine. And also Sophia and LSE for inviting me to be part of this panel on International Women's Day. And what an honour to be on such a great panel as this last one of the day. So Farm Africa is an international NGO. It is its 40th year this year in 2025. It works in East Africa, and we work with about 700,000 project participants each year across all of our programs. Our focus is really on smallholder farmers, and of course that's particularly important for women because the majority of those farmers are women. The majority of food grown in the smallholder agriculture sector is grown by women. Some of the challenges, Josephine, that we encounter in our programs and the communities and farmers that Farm Africa works with are, well, I've been thinking about four really in the lead up to this afternoon. They come under climate, land and access to assets like finance, security and broadly around agency and decision making. In East Africa, as we know, there's reliance on rain-fed agriculture is kind of precarious at the best of times, but climate extremes are ever more apparent across the East Africa region. When I joined Farm Africa in 2020, it was a year of very intense floods, followed by 3 years of really extreme drought and failed harvests. 9.5 million cattle died across the region during that period. And then again last year, widespread flood. So farmers having to deal with more unpredictable and more extreme climate events, that is probably the thing that's most apparent to us and to the farmers that we work with. The second area around land and access to finance, well, women farmers that participate in our programs often have great problems in having access and control over land. One interesting way that we've been trying to address that with some coffee farmers in Uganda has been through household level agreements where the person who controls access and ownership of land, which is generally the male head of the family, is convinced and negotiated to allocate land to women, wives and daughters in his household, so they can own that production, barter for it, negotiate price for it, and participate in the cooperatives. And linked to that, the lack of access to finance, I think, is probably the biggest challenge, the biggest block for the farmers that we work with on building their businesses. All of the farmers that we work with are entrepreneurs, and like anybody, they need access to finance to invest in their business, to access improved seed varieties, to be more resilient to climate change. Thirdly is security. Across East Africa, we saw great challenges on security in Ethiopia, in the work that Farm Africa does in northern Ethiopia, in Tigray, where of course the civil war had, was a terrible incidence of sexual violence in the civil war in Tigray. And similarly, right now in Eastern DRC, we work with coffee cooperatives in Eastern Congo, and as M23 has spread out down the lake region, North Kivu, South Kivu, high levels of displacement and sexual violence as well. So those are some of the challenges that we see in our work and that women farmers describe to the project teams that they work with in Farm Africa. And one final one before we head on to the other panelists, which we might talk about a bit later, is the issue of exploitation and sexual abuse in supply chains. Of course, it's been a big issue in East Africa in the tea sector. We're engaged in a very large project in Kenya in aquaculture, in fisheries. And in Western Kenya, where young women traditionally have accessed fish directly from fishermen from the lake, that sex for fish trade is very prevalent. And some of Farm Africa's work in promoting women entrepreneurs in the fish sector is helping to counter that, and we might get into that a bit later.
Okay, thank you, Dan. I think I'll pick up on the issue of security that you have raised to ask Funke here. You have first-hand experience with farm violence in Kenya. Can you share how this has affected you as a woman to participate in agriculture, or other women who face similar, experiences, and what lessons, can be learned from that experience?
I was just remarking before we started the panel that it is difficult to move forward without looking at your past, to see where you've come from, what lessons are adaptable or useful for your future. When I graduated Harvard, I had this lofty idea of returning to Africa and giving back and doing so much. So I convinced my husband to, cash out his 401k and pack up everything and go home. What a surprise, because I was not prepared for what I met. I met a system that was not very welcoming of an outsider. Now, what I did not do before jumping in was build trust within that community. Now, I ought to know better because I am a traditional Yoruba woman, and we are raised to respect culture. So going in, we made so many amazing to us changes. We were ready to upend the ecosystem, help people to see their place in the value chain, help them to understand that they were being robbed by middlemen, help them to get directly to the market, help to find storage solutions for products that was wasting, help to find partnerships on this side to receive these amazing products that we're churning out. And there was so much productivity at that time. But, well, surprisingly, there was a huge land grab case, and the MP, who was a very powerful man, walked onto our farm with about 50 hoodlums, and they came with machetes and all kinds of things. They threatened us. They said they were going to burn the farmhouse, the greenhouses, and us. And they would put our bodies into the land cruisers and say it was under investigation. Now, these words were said to my 11-year-old son.
Wow.
We were lucky in the sense that he was a smart kid and he videotaped the confrontation. And it was posted first on Facebook and then on Twitter. I must give kudos to Kenyans. Kenyans on Twitter. Kenyans took it upon themselves to defend me. People that I did not know would walk up to me at the mall and say, "I just that Nigerian woman that they're harassing up there. Don't worry, we're going to deal with them." And this is how it started for me, because I realized that with the power of the people, I would have won if I had come right the first time. And that taught me a very important lesson. I realized I needed to gather, because standing on my own, I couldn't do much. In fact, I couldn't do anything. But when I had these women around me, when the older women got up and they said, "No, this will not happen, not on our watch," I started to see changes. When I joined chamas, and you know what a chama is. Now, a chama is a gathering, usually of women, and you would find about maybe 10, sometimes 12 of us, and we would pool our resources. It could be money, it could be seeds, it could be skills. And when these women find you, you find support and advocacy and opening doors in the market. So the man who attacked us, more people than voted for him voted him out. And so this taught me that we do have a voice. Even as rural women, that voice is only heard when we speak together. We cannot individually accelerate the progress that we want, but when we gather together as a force, we will be able to achieve those things that we thought were impossible.
Thank you, Funke.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Josephine, I should say that it led me to teach. And so I started to teach marketing, business management, and for women who really couldn't pay. So I tell you, bring your market and I'll do it. Whatever you have, you can pay me. So I've been paid in oranges, seeds, yogurt, onions. I'll take it.
Thank you, Funke. Now I come to Mikhail. Yeah. You have managed to break into international markets, into different places with your coffee business. Yeah. What strategies did you use, and what would you say are the unique barriers that you have encountered in trying to penetrate or enter into the international market?
Break into the international market is a big word. But thank you, because that's where we're going. I think the difference in my position, I'm going to talk about my background first. I think for people to understand, I'm originally from Rwanda. I'm from Rwanda, but I come from a coffee farmer family. My grandfather was a farmer. My dad went back to Rwanda after 1994's genocide against the Tutsi, went back to where he was born, bought some plots, started growing coffee, all while teaching at university and doing other jobs. And in 2000, started a washing station. So meaning, for those who don't understand the coffee process, that not only did we grow coffee plants, but we processed them into what turns into green beans, which are supplied across the world. And to more recently, 10 years ago, getting a roaster machine, meaning that we can do everything from farm to crop. Saying that, I also come from a country where, which is very regulated and really pushes for gender equality. In Rwanda, 64% of the decision makers are women, and that goes from ministry, from the Senate, the deputy's office, to everyday people you meet. It's not very difficult. There's more women than men on the continent and I think elsewhere. So I think it was easier for me to break the local barriers, because there was a platform. There's no land ownership issues, there are no policies against women entrepreneurs. NAEB, which is the national culture entity in Rwanda, really markets Rwandan produces across the globe. We often have producers flying from Uganda to come and from Rwanda to participate to big events and showcase the products here. So they are really helping. And when I moved here 2 years ago, I was like, what wrong can there be? I mean, I have the backup of the source. Easy. I speak English. Oh well, deception. I came saying, okay, I have something unique. Not everybody can proclaim that they are farm-to-cup brands. I think I can say I'm one, if not the only one. I am one of the few that can say that in the UK. And I thought that was enough to break the market. But then faced issues like, okay, I'm new. I'm new in the UK, nobody knows me. I created my network, that was easy. You go knock at the big chains, they're like, yeah, but you're not offering us competitive prices compared to the big players. I can name a few unions or whatever. And then I go back to them like, yeah, but I know them because they come to Rwanda, go to the co-ops, say, we'll buy all of this year's production at this price. And usually people will take it because like, oh wow, that's sales guarantee for the whole year. There's no leverage. And of course, if they can get 5, 6, 10 containers out of the country at a low cost, logistic-wise, it's cheaper when you do quantity. Come here, they have all these facilities, they have the connections, they have contracts signed for decades. who am I to try to compete with them? And my prices are never going to be theirs. Because the work that I do behind it has nothing to do with what I do. I work with my community, I support my farmers, we pay for their health insurances, we pay for education for their kids. There's a value. Let alone that it's a personal story. Today, if you ask me, okay, Michael, I purchased a bag of coffee, can you tell me who produced it? I can give you the name of the farmer who picked the cherries. I can tell you the name of those who washed it. I can tell you the name of the ones who dried it, roasted it, packed it for me. Well, I don't think anyone else can do it, right? So coming back to your question, barriers were mostly competing with those big players, having no recognition, but also something which people don't really talk about. For you to be able to enter an international market, you are usually requested to have some certifications. Fair trade, organic, there's a few. Those certifications are not given for free because of the work you're doing. There's a big cost behind them, a big cost that not many farmers can afford. Actually, no one. But we know we are producing organic. We know we are doing fair trade. We can prove it. But we can't afford all the certifications that you have to renew every 2 or 3 years. So again, how do I compete with those on the market who can buy those certifications without even owning a coffee farm? Or I'm talking about coffee, but it can be any produce. They don't even know who produces them, but they can go to fair trade and get it. So I would say those are the main, in my case, the main barriers. But it doesn't mean I'm going to give up. I believe being in a space like this, or even talking about this, whatever I can, try to break those barriers. And I'm also looking at people going through the same thing, because as you said, being together creates a force. I'm not going to go knock at Sainsbury's alone and be heard. But if there's 100 of us, 200, we might make a difference. And I believe we will. Yeah.
Thank you. Now, Oluchukwu,
Yes.
your participation in the agriculture value chain is a bit unique as well.
It's different.
Since you are looking more on what do we use, our farm produce or farm waste. So my question to you is, when women are entering into these non-traditional agriculture sectors like, sustainable construction, use of farm waste and things like that, what are the barriers that they face in your experience, and how can these industries also create more inclusive opportunities for women, not just women farmers, but women who are also participating along the agricultural value chain in different capacities?
Well, if I talk about it, it will take forever. But the short answer is that you will face a lot of challenges as a woman, but also as a man. Let me explain why. So this whole biomaterials industry and using agro waste in general to make construction is it's been on, but at the moment it's new. And I like in the context of sugarcrete, I like to call sugarcrete the new vernacular. Why? Because you're using a waste that is local, in a very local, with very local intelligence. The thing I like about
maybe for the benefit of the audience, if you can just explain what
sugarcrete is.
Yes.
Okay, so sugarcrete rhymes with concrete. So I know you guys are very smart. It's basically concrete made from sugar cane waste, and it's a biomaterial that you can use to make buildings. You can't eat it, but it should work to construct your building. And we've just finished the first prototype in India. So during my PhD, what we're doing is monitoring the building performance and the operational energy and air quality of the building inside and out. So that's what I'll be doing. And I'm doing this with the University of East London Sustainability Research Institute. Okay. So, yeah, it's challenging. I think at the moment I'm also doing my part 3, which is I'm doing that to become a fully qualified architect. If some of you guys have been through this, you know it's extremely difficult. Now, I'm going through the papers to kind of like prepare for my examinations, and doing the lectures and everything, one thing that comes up a lot is basically you've got to be careful to know while you're choosing your route of procurement, who is responsible for what. Okay, so let's say, for example, choosing the cladding, for example, especially after Grenfell, what happened? You know, you need to make sure that you chose a procurement route where you protect yourself. So you need to make sure that you get personal insurance indemnity as an architect or contractor or whatever. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, this way of thinking where the building regs and everyone is kind of like looking at who to blame if something goes wrong is really not encouraging us to use sustainable materials. It's not encouraging manufacturers, it's not encouraging insurance companies. Okay, so I'm going to give you a practical situation that I'm currently going through myself to answer your question. So obviously I'm doing my PhD, but the reason why I'm doing my PhD is because I would like to get my hands dirty and probably start a company using these materials or something like that. And on the side, besides sugarcrete, I've opened factories where you can make bricks out of waste, construction waste, hard waste, using resin, so no cement. So that's good. And yesterday I was in a call with an old schoolmate of mine. We studied architecture together, and now he's a developer. I've always wanted to work with developers that are interested in using sustainable materials. And he explained to me how important it is in the UK for us to construct sustainable housing, but also affordable housing and social housing, right? Because as a developer, you've got to give a certain percentage for sustainable housing. And he's explained to me that big developers want to have, are aiming sites that are quite big for, like, let's say 1,000 plus homes. While for developers, there isn't really much gain to go anything below that. So he was aiming to target that niche. And he has described to me how he wants to do it by constructing this mechanism where he's going to be building these structures that can use waste. And he was interested in sugarcrete. Now, the problem is that sugarcane uses lime, but he's looked at hempcrete. But the problem is that sometimes using lime can make the whole material be more expensive. Now, it does not matter how much waste you're using, but if it's expensive, it's not sustainable. What's the point? You see what I mean? So we scrap that. And sugarcane does not grow in the UK. So what's the point of using sugarcane that does not grow in the UK anyway? So I was suggesting to him that I can help him with my team, create a factory, a small factory where we can monetize or manage the waste of that local council in the UK, wherever they're planning to build 11,000 homes. This is what they're planning. And what I need him to do is to speak to the people that are in charge of the waste management of the location. And he was telling me that the problem is that insurance companies do not want to insure new materials. That's one challenge that we're facing, not just as women, but just in general. And if they don't show developers can't sell their homes because no one will give you a mortgage. So I'm telling him this is what it is. So these homes, apparently, they want to build it in the next 5 years. The biggest challenges that we are facing is the government and the lawmakers really not wanting to do the thing that they need to do. It's very hypocritical, and I've said this several times to my fellow architectural, those are in the architecture field, that we're being hypocrites. Architecture is becoming like an elite-based thing where the services that we're providing is super expensive. No one can afford it anymore. And gradually, if you're not careful, no one will need architects anymore, because you can have architecture without architects. You can. So we need to wake up. I see my role as an architect, when I will become one, as an enabler. Now more than ever, we really need enablers to educate people, to be involved in legislation, to get your hands dirty, to be involved in business. I think academia really needs to start, and women, you really need to start being involved in the business. I'm gonna talk, what I'm gonna do to solve this challenge, because I need to propose a solution, is to have several meetings with these lawmakers, with the council, but most importantly with the insurance company that do not want to insure us. And the way I'm gonna do this is to get them involved in the business. They need to be shareholders of the business, because you've got no choice. You've got to, do you see what I mean? You make money that way, and somehow that's how the economy will go. And I think that as women, or anyone anyway, you've got to propose something that is economically viable for people that are business savvy, which everyone is, for it to be attractive to them. I think that's, anyway, the challenge that we're facing.
Thank you so much. I think I will do one last round of questions so that we can open up to everyone to ask you questions about the interesting work you're doing. Okay, Dan, in all these challenges, solutions, programs, and everything, what role do you think partnerships from government, the women themselves, NGOs, private sector, and others play in scaling women-led agricultural initiatives, like the solutions, the work that you do, and everything? What role do partnerships play, and how can we, because there was so much discussion during the day about the different power dynamics that are there in partnerships, in communities, and different spaces. So how, what role do partnerships play, and how can we ensure that each contribution is valued, each partner that is contributing?
So all of the work that we develop and deliver at Farm Africa is done in partnership with a very wide range of other stakeholders. Principally, starting point will be the farmers and the women farmers that we work with. But then ones that are particularly important to us, if I take out of the mix donors, right, we need to get our money from somewhere. Two categories that are worth talking about in terms of scale are the private sector and government. We think about farming as a business, as I mentioned earlier, especially women farmers, they're entrepreneurs and they need investment and access to resources, improved inputs, finance in particular, to grow their businesses. So a couple of examples I could draw on just to help illustrate how we achieve scale in our work through partnerships. In the case of our work in Ethiopia, we've done work for a long time on landscape management approaches in forest landscapes, in rangeland, and those have been really focused on working with communities to regenerate and repair degraded environments, to reduce rates of deforestation, regenerate pasture land, and with a community-based approach to our organising. And in particular where women get the opportunity to lead participatory forest or rangeland management groups, and access to the right inputs in terms of diversifying livelihoods away from, say, degrading forest or overgrazing pasture land. You can see quite quickly very good results in helping to reduce deforestation, improve pasture, diversify livelihoods, and therefore make those communities more resilient, improve income, and in a particular case with the forestry work that we're engaged with, for several of those management committees, there's also a carbon income as well. So there are lots of good outcomes, I think, to the landscape management approach. What we've been particularly pleased about at Farm Africa is working in partnership with the Ethiopian authorities from Kebele, the local organising level, to national level, on influencing policy on biosphere management and on the benefit sharing mechanisms that are put in place to help communities transparently manage and share the income that comes from, in this case, carbon, or the increased income from the pasture lands. Using data and evidence and advocacy from the ground up to demonstrate to those partners in government that these are approaches which are sustainable and cost effective. You can see the results in that being replicated in government strategy. That's kind of the holy grail for an NGO like ours, because you can only achieve scale at a certain level through a project approach, and the real breakthroughs come with scale through policy influencing. And then, as just to mention briefly, the private sector, I've been really interested in following the development in Farm Africa of our work in, I think I mentioned it earlier, aquaculture. There was a large program in a fishery in Kenya with 150,000 young entrepreneurs, and again, mostly female. And that's all about scale through private sector, because each of those little enterprises needs to thrive in connection with a growing market for fish in those parts of Kenya where they want to improve food security through this really crucial protein source, increase employment, and actually reduce reliance on fish inputs. And so the network of private sector off-takers, research bodies that we've been working with to develop improved strains of soya for fish feed, have all been really essential in achieving scale. And yeah, it makes Farm Africa just, I suppose, one catalyst, one stakeholder in a really interesting mix of partners. But I think the private sector and the government ones, in the context where we work, have the power to really bring change.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you. I move to you, Funke. Your background, you were a child broadcaster, an author, and everything. How can storytelling and communication be used to advocate for policy change and women's empowerment in agriculture?
Thank you. Permit me to stand up for a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
This is a narrative. Everything that is traditional, that points back to my community, says that I've been entrusted with some level of leadership. It says that the mothers who passed these to me had learned some things that they gave to me so that I could give to those who come behind me. Women are the Earth's most important resource, and we are abundant. This planet ought not to be poor in any areas, because we are there. I was told that I would be in the presence of queens today and of kings who support them. Now, a narrative carries power. We've been asking, where does the power sit? The power sits with us in the stories that we tell, in the stories that built us up into who we are today. And each one of us here is a combination of layered narratives. The stories that you were told as a child, the stories that your communities embrace as their origin or as their raison d'etre. The Maasais of Kenya believe that the great God gave us the charge to look after the cattle and the land that the cattle needs. And so it means that we have the right to pass wheresoever we want. And you will find that anyone who knows culture in Kenya will not stand in the way of a Maasai, because you understand the narrative behind it. Cindy? Right. Now, when we come to fora like this, to sit down and talk about the narrative going forward, we've looked at where we've come from. We've asked ourselves, what can we adapt? What can we graft? What can we create anew? Aurelie Walker was talking to me just now about not reinventing the wheel, because the wheel already exists. You've done something in your community that I can learn from. How about I come learn that from you? And we create a socio-economic grafting. Now, in agriculture, we can take a tree that grows fat, beautiful fruit oranges, and take another tree that grows really sweet, beautiful inner color oranges. And we put these two trees together, and we bind them with the cord of love. And when they produce, the fruit is rich from either side. It's the same thing with humanity. If you will bring to the table what your community holds dear, and I bring to the table what my community holds dear, we can together create treasures for both communities. And this is the way I see the future happening for us. I'm not just talking about Africa. Globally, women hold in our hands the biggest residual power that any group ever could. And we know that for millennia, we have managed to wield this power right. Well, with a few exceptions. If we decide as a group, as collective stakeholders, co-owners of this common resource that we have, we will affect policy. We will open those doors. We will put our voices together all across this beautiful planet and make changes possible for our sisters. I was talking about the Maasai. Let me tell you a story about my friends in Narok. Maasai culture does not allow the woman to own assets in the household. When she's married, cows are given in exchange. And so essentially she comes with wealth from her father's household in cattle. When she gets to that homestead, the cattle are not hers. They belong to the man. However, culture allows her to own one thing, the milk, because she needs to feed the family with that milk. What did my friends in Narok do? Julia went to study probiotics and how to make yogurts with it. Then she spoke to a friend and said, we will start a yogurt business. First, we will ask our husbands for permission. Then our husbands will ask the chiefs for permission. Then we will share this thing so that people can taste it and see that it is good. With sampling, they won the community. But how did they get the raw materials? They taught each woman who only has rights to the milk how to milk hygienically and properly. And they created a chama. Remember I told you what a chama is? That says if you bring milk, that amount of milk becomes your monetary contribution to this business. So we're all stakeholders. And each woman, no matter how many liters of milk she brought, it added to that batch of yogurt. And when harvest in products was gotten, this woman got her share of the money through M-Pesa. It meant that she could control her earnings. She could use this money for her family. She could educate her children. She could invest in her sisters, other members of that chama. And all of this was done without, well, the patriarchy looking over her shoulder. So she didn't have to feel unsafe because she was prospering. And you will understand that for many of us in rural communities, a woman who prospers is also endangered. So I'll leave it here for today and allow my sister to continue. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for that, Mikhail. Now, you have shared about your struggles and the barriers that are there. If there was one major policy or initiative that could dramatically improve the situation of women in your position, what would that be?
When you say women in my position, as in on an international market?
Yes.
Oh, there are too many.
Pick one.
But I think if there could be a policy where, coming back to what my sister said about storytelling, if our unique story, I've shared mine, could be valued as much as a certification is. Because I think you can't even compare them. But if only there was a policy saying, we know the story, we can testify, is there any other way we can put it forward without putting that extra cost on the farmers or the entrepreneur, and just crop off those certifications, which for me don't mean much other than PR and because the big organization use that for PR. I'm sorry. I'm sure Dan knows a little bit about that as well. But we don't need the PR. What we need is to be able to make money for our communities, the people that actually work behind those products, and that deserve to be recognized. And that, obviously, as we mentioned earlier, over 70% of farmers are women. So it has even a bigger voice if they could earn what the actual value is. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Put value on the experiences and stories of women. Thank you. Now, Oluchukwu, what future do you see for young women in agriculture innovation? The space that you're in, using agriculture products, other sectors, and the connections and everything. What future do you envisage for young women?
I think the sky is the beginning, not even the limit. Let's just start from there. I have this habit, which might be bad. I try to convince every friend of mine, so women, to go for a PhD.
Thank you.
Even if they're just starting I try to convince them to go into research, especially those that are thinking about it. Even if they don't have a master's, apparently you can actually go into research. Because there's nothing worse than, for the community, than someone that is stubborn and ignorant. We don't like that. We don't need that. And for women, sorry, but you need to just put in double the effort. But take it with pride and do it well, So wherever you are, I think something that the University of East London and probably LSE as well, I can see that, is great at is global, communication and knowledge exchange. That's the word. So wherever you are, first of all, start from your community, from your village meeting, okay? Simple. And then talk to each other. Try to have a community of women that you can actually rely on. Look at the woman in your village that you most respect, the most powerful, the wealthiest one that you admire, and that you think that you can drive from the energy that she has, okay? And then take that energy and transfer it to your daughters, to your sisters. And if you are in the position of talking to people that are overseas or university, or you can apply to PhD, because at the moment it's so easy to apply to. I've helped my friend to apply, like being in the position that I am with the University of East London. I know who to speak to. the top bosses, and I'm like, I think they're going to give you funding for that research, so you're going to do that. I don't think you can say no to me. Sorry, I'm being a bit bully here, but I know that sometimes we just have to encourage our friends, because probably we see a great future for them that they might not even be able to see for themselves, and all they need is just that push. So wherever you are as a woman, when it comes to future, it's either you are someone that's pushing someone or push yourself, but you can't just be adamant and just be stagnant. We don't want that. So I think the bottom line is education. Education is important. Educate yourself and educate someone, and collaboration, exchange knowledge. I think that's it.
Thank you, Oluchiku, for that insight. Now, are there any questions, comments for our panelists? Okay, I see a question there, there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You
can start.
Or you can start, of course. Thank you. That was an awesome demonstration of just that coming together. That Shama that you talked about is just, it was lovely to see it on the panel in that way. But just to introduce myself, so my name is Chantal, and I'm the founder of the Good Coffee Project. I was going to say I was invited here by someone, but I won't say that.
You can.
I'll just say, just all the observations I was taking, I just wanted to really kind of like, I could sit here for another hour listening, because I feel like there were so many different points from each person that was valid, that added to the conversation in a unique way. I think my perspective is just in terms of like understanding how all of this knowledge is something that is going to be passed on to the younger generation, to get them interested in getting on board with agriculture, because it's such an important part of the world. It's like, if we don't sustain this and the younger generation is not taking interest, how are we going to get them on board? I'm also very interested in building on relationships between Africa and the Caribbean, and seeing more of that embracing of what's happening in Africa, that in essence, the Caribbean has been known for like holiday destinations and, you know, being that spot for everything else. But then when it comes to like, you know, land development and these kinds of things, this is where I feel like we should be connecting more and understanding how we're going to build those bridges and that relationship. So in essence, I'm just taking a lot of things in, and I don't know if there's any perspectives that you guys can add to that, but that is just my thought. I could tell you who introduced me here, but I won't. I'll leave that for you guys to guess.
Thank you so much for your presentation. And I
She also
resonate
had
with
a
Sorry,
hand.
Dr. Yashin.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Please.
Go ahead.
Hi everyone, I'm Ampuak. Thank you so much for your presentation. I could resonate with lots of what you said. So I have just a few questions.
Please.
Okay, louder.
Speak up
Okay,
a
sorry.
little.
So one is looking at like the global value chain that all of you are engaged with, and I wonder, is there a conflict of interest between the global value chain and Africa's food security, where we're focused on promoting production of agricultural produce like coffee or tea that is drunk by maybe 10% of Africans for a global market? And how is that in competition with producing food for Africa, whose badge is food insecurity? When you speak about food in Africa, you know, we are represented with simultaneously with food insecurity, yet we're producing for this global value chain. And I wonder if you've considered what's the conflict of interest and how that contributes to the food insecurity in Africa. My second question is around education. Oluchukwu, you spoke so much about education, and back to whose education is valued and whose knowledge is valued, and how do we incorporate our own local knowledge into our educational systems. Because if we know in Africa lots of traditional knowledge, these agricultural knowledge are not in our schools. And when we look at histories, we understand where this stems from. So how do we engage with that? And just backing on her question around South-South collaborations, how do we engage with South-South collaborations? Because that's what works for us, because we have similar stories, similar experiences, and we share so much similarities. And so how do we engage with that to, provide for ourselves and, uplift both all South-South countries? Thank you.
Thank you. I think there's one last question, then I can come back to the panelists.
Yeah, thank you for the informative and inspiring session. So I have two questions. First I'll introduce myself. I'm a master's student from King's College London, and it's based on related to one of the research that I presented at the London Student Sustainability Conference recently. It was about gender inequality among tea plantation workers in Kerala, which is a state in India. So one of the key findings of my study was at times, many of the daughters, like people who are in their 25 to 30 age group of tea plantation workers, even with a master's degree and a good academic knowledge and qualification, they get trapped in the tea plantation work itself without doing the job that they are trained for. So when we are talking about what next, I think it is important to address that many a times the daughters or son or the kids of the agriculture workers get trapped in the job itself without getting into a formal sector. Sometimes they can make the agriculture work profitable for them, but at times they may also get trapped in the poverty and the informal sector. So that's one question. And another one is that Dan mentioned about the sexual exploitation of female agriculture workers. So when we talk about corporate and formal sector jobs, there are commissions and prohibition of sexual abuse cells in most places to follow the labor laws. But when it comes to agriculture sector, it's not present there, as it's an informal sector. So how can we prevent that? So these are two of my questions.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So our panelists, we have 5 questions that have been presented. So the first one is how to get young people interested in agriculture, this conversation, when they are seemingly not. And so who wants to
I can take that one.
Yeah.
I think I'm the perfect example, being third generation into my family's a business.
Yeah.
I think, come back to education. Food is the future. I mean, there's not one country or one community that can survive without food. And education plays a huge part in it, towards educating the younger generation about the importance of what they can bring. Nowadays, with AI and all of that, of course, you can do PhDs and research. But I see it more and more in Rwanda. So much money has been invested in agriculture and AI, towards AI as well, hydroponics, making these things even fun for the younger generation, right? I don't think I would have ever done the job that my grandfather did at the time. They didn't have the tools. They did everything manually, but with evolution, things change. Now we have machines, now it's fun. My daughters, during holidays, they go and pack coffee bags. They understand the importance and the value. They know that they can make more money going into agriculture than creating another app, for instance. So it goes back to education and also our culture. I come from Africa, where agriculture is part of us. Putting that in our children, grandchildren, and carrying on the way we are.
Thank you. I will combine two questions for Oluchukwu about education. The first question was on, whose education and the value, around the value that we place on different kinds of knowledge and different types of education, as well as considering that and the question around, despite having the qualifications, the certificates, you're still trapped in a job that's not similar, or you get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I will answer it properly, but so this is what I need to say, that sometimes, actually very often, Africans have misplaced priorities. We are so obsessed with overseas and sending our goods abroad that we forget that we need to sort ourselves out first and be sustainable. There are other things, projects that I'm working on besides sugarcrete. And I think I'm sure you probably know the answer to some of the questions that you've asked me, especially in terms of how do we gather the information and the knowledge that we have. You know the answer, and I'm sure of that. The only thing is that you don't want to do the work. And the work you have to do is literally you need to go out there, gather the data, one by one, speak to people one by one, and gather the data, because the data is nowhere to be found. Why? Because it's so hard to do. Literally, what we have to do is do the job from scratch. I've done it, and it's very hard. So let me tell you, there's this. I'm the founder of this Tutafa, which is a platform that basically showcases only African-made products. Because in Nigeria, I'm from Nigeria, and in Nigeria we all this town, city that's called Aba, and everybody calls it the Japan of Africa, because apparently there are so many people that produce several things. Me, I'm very inquisitive, and I don't believe anybody, right? And I want to know why this town is called the Japan or China of Africa, because I'm pretty sure it isn't. It doesn't look like China or Japan. So what I did, I created a team, and I sent them out, and I said, go out there and ask each manufacturer that's based in this zone called Ariaria, and talk to them and ask them these questions. There were 20 questions. It took us like a year plus to do this. I'm telling you, they sweated, they cried about this, but we got the data. We got the data, we did a survey. It was so important to understand all the challenges that these manufacturers were facing and why they were acting the way they were acting, and understand the kind of training that they need. So basically, we managed to gather we talked to almost 5,000 manufacturers in that space. This data, you can't Google it. Not even ChatGPT can't even find it. It's not even DeepSeek, sorry. We have it. We meticulously gathered all this data, and we're gonna keep it safe. That's how you gather your data. So when it comes to education and things that we know, and the way our ancestors used to do some certain things with medications and agriculture and food, we just literally need to sit down with our parents and grandparents, those that are still alive, and write these things down and put them somewhere safe. And maybe the community has to put money together to run a group of people that will just make sure that this is protected for centuries. Literally, that's what you have to do. It's not that difficult, but it's hard. I need someone that is committed. What was the other question? Oh yeah, with Caribbeans and working together, was it that same question? I think there's a lot. There's like a renaissance happening with the Africans and Caribbean, a lot. We are finally working well together, or we're getting there, thank God. Because it's needed, and I know that there's Innocent car, for instance, that is produced or manufactured in Nigeria. We want to kind of start exporting it to Jamaica, and we'll have just different things happening among us, and I just can't wait for that to happen. Then we have Dangote that is planning on opening more refineries on other parts of Africa other than Nigeria, which is fantastic. I've never actually heard of that before. So it's so exciting. I just think that you need to stop doubting yourself and literally start doing the work. forget about, sometimes, right, we are focused on being the sole owners, I own 100% of this company, but it is better to own 1% of a company that's worth 1 million than owning 100% of a company that is worth 0. We need to change that mentality, because that's the problem. Collaboration, bridging the gap. Understand that it's really not about you, it's about the future generation. Once you understand this, that's it. Yeah.
Thank you. So I'll come to Dan on the issue of 2 issues that we raised, the issue of conflict of interest and balancing food security and producing for the global markets, because you work with coffee farmers, tea farmers, and also the question on the exploitation of women in the agriculture value chain.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I really like that question on food systems. It's a really important one. I think the first priority has to be household, local, national food security. And I think that's achievable, even against the backdrop of all of the many challenges that we talked about at the beginning, from climate to security to access to land and finance. And one of the reasons I think it's achievable is that in the areas where Farm Africa is working on the smallholder plots, there's quite a big yield gap. Whether we're talking about farming in sorghum or in horticulture or in wheat, many of those plots can produce more with the right climate smart approaches, with improved inputs, and with good agricultural practice. So I would like to say that it needn't necessarily be a choice between local and national food security, and also taking advantages of the income opportunities that do exist from international trade in commodities like coffee. And in some cases, and I'm thinking about, again, the forest coffee that Farm Africa works with cooperatives on harvesting in Ethiopia, that is kind of the best product for that location, because the last thing you want to do is cut down the trees for cultivation. And the coffee grows well under the tree cover. Actually, the biggest market for coffee in Ethiopia is domestic, but there's high demand for and high price for coffee coming from those forests. And I think it's it shouldn't be beyond the possible to combine the priority of household, local and national food security and the opportunity of engaging on international markets. And a short note on this, such an interesting thing that I saw myself in Western Kenya last year, visiting these small groups that are being set up by mostly young women to get them into the fish production market. And this is mostly pond-based fishery. And as we mentioned earlier, there's a long and horrible tradition of young women who need to access fish from to take to market from the lakeshore, and that is the transaction of sex for fish. And working with young women, in fact these are mixed groups, and they're deliberately young people groups, so young entrepreneurs, to build their businesses, to have their own access to well-grown fish, well-fed fish, healthy, using sustainable fish feed like coming from the black soldier fly and the improved soya. Amongst the many opportunities that brings, particularly income, it means that those young women don't have to go to the lakeshore anymore and be exposed to that abuse. And they have more agency and more safety. And I think that's a very positive way of tackling that.
Thank you, Dan. Now, Funke, the mission on South-to-South collaboration. You speak more than 10 African languages and Haitian Creole. So tell us, how, are you able to collaborate? How can we collaborate between, Africa, the Caribbean, and other parts of the global majority, really? How can we collaborate on this?
I'll say this in Creole first. Wap kite village ou. You gotta leave your village first. You gotta step out of your doorstep for you to see what's out there. We cannot stay within our own confined spaces and expect to know what the next person is all about. You don't get to be my friend until you come know me, so you see the realities of what I deal with. Now, it's funny how I got to Haiti. When the first earthquake happened, I was head of marketing for Samsung, and I was at the point in my life where I had an epiphany. I lost someone very close to me, and I suddenly couldn't live at home anymore. And it made me want to leave Nigeria. So when the earthquake happened and the call came, who wants to come and help? Well, hey, I bought my own ticket. And when I got to Haiti, what a shock. I understood the language. I recognized the people. We had the same culture. I heard the same talking drums and my feet could not stop moving. And I realized that that's my music. And when I open my mouth and I say certain things, they say in our tradition, in our history, it is handed down like that. Now, the language that I learned by being embraced within the Haitian community, when I got to Mauritius, that's the same language. Yes. So in Kenya, I was on a project where we were using mobile phones to teach people, especially in the rural areas, financial literacy, to the point that you could use your M-Pesa to invest in the formal markets. And we were teaching them how to look and see what to invest in. And we suddenly had people from Mauritius, from Kenya, from Jamaica, all of us on one virtual call, and we realized we could work together and develop the kind of tech that will help our people learn. It doesn't have to be physical. Just with a mobile phone, you can learn certain skills. So these are the things I mean by stepping out of your village. I used to work in Egypt. I managed a brand called Firoz. And it's such a part of my life that I still wear a Firoz stone, because, well, way back then I was told that it's really lucky. And, well, I've been lucky. I was sitting in El Arish, and someone brought me a drink. It was red. I looked at it, I said, Omo Naija, this one looked familiar. Yeah. I took a glass, and I exclaimed, oh my God, it's Zobo. It's the same red hibiscus flower drink that we are served in Kaduna, that we are served in Nairobi. And so where did we learn that we were different? We need to unlearn certain things and relearn our similarities. And these are the only ways that we can make progress.
Thank you. Our lovely panelists for sharing your experiences and knowledge and skills with us. And I'll leave it to Sophia to inform us of the next steps. Do not rush out.
Professor Naila Kabir will give the closing ceremony, so please don't leave yet. Thank you.
Something. Sophia. Might I take the opportunity to implore each one of you, please don't leave here without doing something concrete with what we've learned today. Walk up to someone, partner on something, do something that we can look back together and say, on this day, we sat together as women and this happened because of
And
it.
the men.
And men.
speak here? Is that all right? Yeah. Okay, I think everyone is tired. We've taken a lot of information, drama, narratives, stories, thoughts, it's been quite a packed day. And I think the richness of the day has come from the fact that it is not made up of a homogeneous group of academics, right? We can draw on and on and on and on. But it's been a mixture of people from very different walks of life, but all sharing certain values in common. Now, those of you who work on the environment probably know the same. I heard it a long time ago, and I was reminded of it today. So I had to look it up on Google search, who said it. I knew it was someone very famous, and I thought it was Bertrand Russell. But actually it was Albert Einstein, who's just as famous. And he said something along the lines of, the environment is everything that is not me. Think about it. The environment is everything that is not me. And I understood what that meant a little bit more today. Because if we think that today was focused on agriculture, right? Nevertheless, the issues that we covered were all about me and not me, right? We talked about food, we talked about water, we talked about shelter, we talked about transport, we talked about buildings. I learned a lot about buildings today, both on the floor and over lunch, about how much of our lives are influenced by where we live and where we sit and talk. And actually, even our brains are going to be shaped in the long run. So I think there was a lot of very fascinating information coming at us from different directions. Second theme, I think, was localization, going against this kind of relentless drive towards globalization. And I think today was very much focusing on the local. And about how far we can get if we take the local seriously. If we take local knowledge seriously, if we take local mobility seriously, you'll get from one place to another without having to go via. Right now, for us to go from Bangladesh, from Dhaka in Bangladesh to Karachi in Pakistan, you can't go over, I'm talking national now. You have to go either via Colombo or Now think about that locally. If we had just basic infrastructure and mobility, and those little tricycles and things, And I thought it was interesting that those women didn't want paved roads. They wanted forms of transport that could get them from one place to another. Using local knowledge, I think that was really important, and saving it and valuing it. And I have to tell you something terrible about myself. When I went to do field work in 1979 in a village in Bangladesh, a farmer came up to me and he said, all these HIV seeds, they are robbing the soil of fertility. And I thought, oh, what does he know, Really? But of course they were. But at that time, in September, it hadn't become common knowledge that this kind of agriculture, this high-tech agriculture, was not doing a great deal of good for the soil. So I think, and the other thing is about local education. In a sense, someone talked about the importance of education, but not education that is equipped to making us compete in larger global economies, but education that allows us to make science work at the local level, that applies to everyday life, environmental solutions that work at the small scale. And I think the issue of scale was quite important, And the question I was asking myself is, people are always talking about scaling up, but it doesn't make any difference unless you scale up. So I thought, are there two models for scaling up? One is you start large scale, right? And for that, you need certain kinds of science, technology, etc., which is very often imported. This is a question, I have no answer. Or you start small scale and multiply and proliferate and go up. So it's sort of scaling from the bottom up. Is that a model that one could think about for the future? I liked Imogen talk about finance. We live in a financialization world. And yet there are people who will not accept loans unless they feel that they can pay it back, unless it's based on trust. And at the other end of the spectrum are people that will lend anybody any kind of money because they know that they can, dispossess them, repossess their houses, and so on. So it's a very different model of finance, but it's based on, again, values of trust and reciprocity. And I think I talked in the morning about the importance of values of trust and reciprocity. And that takes me to the heart of economics, which has always been about, we have to maximize, growth, everything has to be maximized. But there's another concept in economics, which I thought about today, which is satisficing. In other words, let us, put all our efforts into having enough, not maximizing, profit maximization, this kind of scale maximization. I can't remember exactly what satisficing means, if it was Herbert Simon, but it held up this model of a world where your efforts are directed towards having enough, being content. I think 2 more points. One is I heard a lot about the importance of association, right? Of people coming together, of collectives. And a little bit more also about deliberation. Association giving you the space where you can come together and discuss your common problems and look for solutions that might work. But I think that act of being able to deliberate is in and of itself valuable, whether it achieves what it set out to achieve. And recently I've been hearing about these citizens' assemblies, where I think Holland, the Netherlands has one, Ireland had one, Ireland and abortion, very Catholic country against abortion. And they had the citizens' assembly, and over 6 months, people from all walks of life came together, discussed the pros and cons, what they liked, what they didn't like, what they didn't. And at the end of it, they came out with a recommendation about legalizing abortion. And in a world where we are so divided, I think those opportunities for deliberation, whether they happen at the local level, or a higher level, but that respectful conversation of accepting that we don't all agree on everything all of the time, I think, it's very good practice for citizenship. My final point, I think, and I said it might be a little bit controversial because there's so many minuses, right? So many minuses. And it's about the cutting down of USAID and the cutting down of aid in order to put more money into defense. There is nothing to celebrate about it, but there is, not to celebrate, but there is something to think about, and that is the extent to which acceptance of aid has guided our pathways to progress. It has not allowed us. So is it possible that we can now kind of reverse back a bit and think about alternative ideas and pathways to progress? And can we think about alternative ways of getting the kind of resources that we need? And that actually goes back to tax. So while I was sitting there, I was Googling. In the OECD, only 3 countries have a wealth tax. The richest African countries do not have a wealth tax. So Africa may be regarded as a poor country, but it has some very, very rich people. And Mauritius is a tax haven. So I think this business of cutting back or cutting down aid may be a kind of an opportunity space to think about greater self-reliance, think about how do we tap into the resources that we already have. But I think in the interest of climate, we have to get that loss and damage fund, because we cannot progress even to clean carbon, low carbon pathway without having some acceptance of what colonialism in the past has done to our countries. So I think those are the thoughts, slightly random, but I found a lot to learn and think about for this session. So thank you very much.
Well, that brings us to the closing of the International Women's Day Conference. If everyone wants to stay, there will be a networking reception at 5:30, and there will be another panel at 7 p.m. on Commonwealth Leadership Series. So if anyone wants to stay, please feel free, and thank you so much.